to Imaginative Visions Journeys, where creators from the entertainment world discuss their journey to turning their dreams into reality. With your host, Justin D. Williams.
Welcome everyone to Imaginative Visions Journeys. This will also be on otakusandgeeks.com. Justin here, and we're back with episode 18. Today we have writer, director, and she's going to be talking about her new short that's premiering at HollyShorts. Please welcome Kaz. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I what I always like to do, and for journeys, I always like to start with the origin, your beginnings of your artistry. Do you remember the beginning of what made you want to do film? Like what inspired you to want to do film?
Well, I mean, the way I'll answer that is that I have always, and I primarily kind of identify as a storyteller, and I have been telling stories and writing stories since I could hold a crayon. Like it was always my passion and my fascination. And I always kind of assumed that I was gonna be a novelist. And it wasn't till I got to college and took a couple of initially playwriting classes, and just kind of got bit by the bug and just thought, this is actually the way I want to tell stories. This makes sense to my brain so much more. And then that just kind of naturally gravitated to screenwriting and to filmmaking, just because it was felt more immediate and more just kind of gelled with my sensibilities. And so, yeah, I kind of went from there. I started, I wrote my first terrible screenplay in college, and then was fairly self-taught because my writing program in school was more prose focused. And so I kind of, learned through trial and error how to write a script that worked. And yeah, and just kind of went from there. I made my excuse me, I made my first short in like 2008. And just, I just love the process. I love the collaborative nature of filmmaking. I love, I look at somebody who's an amazing fine artist and they have this ability that I'm so envious of, to have an image in their head and be able to render it accurately on paper. I can't do that at all, but what I can do is have a story in my head and get it onto a screen, which is like a way of getting it into someone else's head, which I think is just such a magical process, and I'm just, kind of obsessed with it. So that's really kind of what drives me when it comes to telling stories.
And you said self-taught, so that means you had to basically learn the format of the actual screenplay, like the exterior, the interiors, and how to format it.
Oh, I mean that, yeah, that part of it, but also just, I mean, three act structure is, it is intuitive in the sense that, it exists because that's how our brains like to absorb stories. But it's tricky to learn. I'm a big believer that you have to learn the rules so that you can break them. But I remember first time kind of encountering that structure and kind of going, oh God, I haven't been doing that at all. No wonder my screenplays kind of have a ways to go. So I've been fortunate to, throughout college, I did a couple of like summer courses in screenwriting, and then just, trial and error, just reading other people's reading scripts that I loved, and, taking notes, like being really good at taking notes and listening to people and being able to absorb criticisms and all that. And yeah, in some ways I feel very fortunate to have not gone through the kind of like screenwriting indoctrination machine that, a lot of folks who get either undergrad or master's degrees kind of come out having been shaped into a particular box kind of a thing. So I didn't get either the benefits or the disadvantages of that, which I think, is kind of it makes, makes for a kind of unique take on story, I think.
And let's fast forward it to a bit because now you're a screenwriter, you're doing your short films. What was your first like experience? Now you're writing a script and now you're on set. And now you're seeing what you have written come to life. What was that experience like?
I mean, it's for anyone out there who is an aspiring filmmaker, let me just tell you, it is as awesome as you think it is. It's a magical, magical experience. Obviously, you have to get lucky in a number of ways because you have to get, find actors that can bring your vision to life and who can work with you. And directing actors is another thing that, I didn't have formal training in and had to kind of like find my own way to, because there's, one of the first, I think, like panicky moments I ever had on a set was when I wasn't getting the performance that I wanted and I could not figure out what to say to get it, and that's the scary part. That's part of the craft. If it was easy and not scary, everyone would do it, you know what I mean? So it's kind of it, it's um it's a risky and thrilling endeavor, and I think that's why so many people are just, compelled towards it. But yeah, no, that for, I shot my first short, like I said, back in like 2008. It was right after I'd, as I always say, kind of decided to quit my day job and run away with the circus and really commit myself to pursuing creative work that I really believed in. And I was fortunate to, through my work that was in production, have a bunch of friends who were also frustrated film artists who are working in kind of crappy production gigs that they didn't love but had to pay the rent, who all were like, yes, let's come together and make something like artistic and creative and weird and cool. So I had a lot of great talent with me, and great actors. And yeah, it just really feels like you get to exist in a fantasy for, the duration of the shoot. And obviously there's plenty of admin and logistics and the
Yeah.
boring stuff and the terrifying stuff when you're not getting the shot and you're losing the light and you don't know if you're going to pull it off. And I've been fortunate that every film I've set out to make, I've made, and I know that's not always the case. And I'm very grateful that that's happened and that I've been, so fortunate to have amazing teams and amazing support. But yeah, no, being on set, it's one of my favorites, my happy place, it's my favorite place to be.
And now for a good death, you're doing like triple duty. You're the writer, you're also directing in this one, producing. Which hat would you find to be the most challenging one to wear when you're juggling all of that?
Well, I mean, absolutely directing, because writing, uh, at least in this situation for me, which was that it was a, self-produced short film, I didn't have a deadline. I didn't have a studio breathing down my neck. I kind of had the time to make the space to get the story where I wanted. My producer was, an incredible sounding board, and he gives great notes and knows really kind of how to mold a story into being something that, we were obviously looking to do something that was affordable. It's a single location, three actors. And so you get that part. But basically, I had the time and the space that I needed to get the script where I wanted it. Once you're on set, you've got 8 hours,
Mm.
and if something's going wrong, it's not like you can just add a couple more hours to the day. You've got people who need to get home. You've got, light sun, a glowing orb in the sky that's going to go away at a certain time. So the pressure is much greater, when you're directing, but that's also so much more thrilling. Writing is a very solitary pursuit. It's usually me at the kitchen table on my laptop. Whereas, in a directing scenario, you've got all these moving parts, all these moving bodies. And it's really a juggling act. I saw this great interview with Coleman Domingo, who's, the actor who's recently kind of had this big blow up, and was on this show, The Four Seasons, and he actually directed one of the episodes. And I saw an interview with him where they're saying, what do you think makes you a good director? And his answer I adored. He said, well, because I know how to throw a good party. And I thought that was such a great, and I realized I was like, that's kind of how I think about it too. Because if you're hosting a party, you have to know how to take care of everybody. You have to know how to support everyone, know what everyone needs, what they want, what they don't want, and keep it light and keep it fun. And, I've certainly been on sets, including my own, where everybody was stressed, everybody was frustrated, no one was having fun at the party, and that you can make good art that way, but I think there's always going to be something missing if there's not that joy.
That joy
So
factor.
yeah, the joy factor is really, really important. And if you can achieve it, I like on a good death, one of the I mean, I had so many amazing team members, but one in particular that I have to shout out is my cinematographer, Adrian Penkorea, who just has the most calm, chill, friendly, like Zen persona on set. Just never stressed me out, never made me feel rushed or any of those things. And that's just so essential, so important. And you're so fortunate as a director when you find a collaborator like that. So,
And speaking of that, because what I loved about the film, it is not just the cinematography, it's just kind of like this sense of dread from the beginning to the end. The minute Amaya walks in,
thank you.
like I'm watching this and I'm just like, something's off. And then we see Tabitha. I'm like, something's really off with just by Tabitha's appearance, the way she's acting, and then we meet Gertrude, and it's just like, okay, something is really off. So what inspired or like how did you come up with this? And I'm gonna keep the spoiler free, but how did you come up with this concept of someone that her job is to make people more at ease with facing death?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for it's a great compliment to hear that I achieved my goal of making it filled with dread. That was definitely what I was going for. We were joking that we feel like we've coined a new genre, which we refer to as high femme gothic horror. And just in the sense that it's got sort of grandma's attic vibes, but with this underlay, there's a lot of sort of lace and doilies and that kind of very vintage femme aesthetic that I wanted to also make horrifying. But to answer your question about where the idea came from, I was actually at a girlfriend's birthday party and I struck up a conversation with a woman and of course came around to, oh, so what do you do? And she was like, oh, I'm a death doula. And I was like, oh my, and I obviously heard of this practice before,
Hmm.
but I'd never had the opportunity to speak to somebody who did it. And so I was like, can I pick your brain? Like, I'm just so fascinated. And she was like, of course. And so I was asking her all these questions and she was telling me all about her practice. And it's just, for anybody who doesn't know, death doulas are they come and they help you at your end of life, but they're not hospice. It's not medical at all. It's really just about the spiritual and emotional and psychological part of it. And literally, their goal is to give you a good death, meaning that you're not scared, you're not filled with regret, you get to have closure. And the whole time she's telling me this, I'm thinking, God, that's such a beautiful, like radically compassionate practice. But also, you have to go into the home of a stranger just with every wall down, like all your guard is down, your heart is wide open, you're ready to receive anything this person and this family is going to throw at you. And I couldn't help but think, because I'm a horror nerd and this is how my brain works, wow, that would be someone it would be really easy to take advantage of. They are
Yeah.
not going to be on the lookout for red flags, for like
Hmm.
danger signals. They're just going to be like, take whatever it is as as it comes. And so that was kind of the genesis of the idea. And, initially I was like, oh, what if, they pull in a death doula and it's a scam or it's a hostage situation or it's a something. And then I just thought, what if I get worse than that? And that was kind of where I ended up with the not so great situation that our lovely death doula Amalia walks into in the story.
Yeah, because I was watching this and I was like, I heard about it, but I didn't really see it like as in depth of what they do until like the film with Amalia, what she was doing. And there was
Yeah.
just like that one creepy scene, which I won't talk about because it's a spoiler, but there's like hints in there that like, yeah, there's something like red flags all over. She's just so hell bent on helping this person. Like, this is her
Exactly.
calling. And because the characterization, we learn her backstory of why she's like this, but we get to see that, and I'm just like, yeah, but there's things around here that you're not paying attention to because you're
Well,
so focused on your mission.
Well, it's something actually that Tracy Toms, who's the actress who played Amalia, she and I had a bunch of conversations about because she is personally a big horror nerd. But she kind of made this observation that she was like, you don't often get Black protagonists in horror films. And her theory is that, you know, Black people in general have a higher sense of something's wrong, I gotta go. And then, that there's, that it's harder to believe, right, that
Mm.
somebody, that a Black person would walk into a creepy house, a creepy castle, a whatever, and just be like, this is fine. And so she and I had a lot of conversations, and it ended up being like wonderfully enriching for the character, where we kind of realized that her red flag, radar has been impaired by the fact that she's grieving her mom so hard,
Yeah.
and she has found in her practice as a death doula finally this way of, healing. Every time she helps someone else have a good death, it's helping her feel better about the fact that her mom didn't, and that basically gave her these blinders. So whereas under normal circumstances, she'd be like, you're creepy, this is weird, I'm out of here. She instead kind of becomes fixated on Gertrude as kind of a proxy for her own mom, and it's like, I have to protect this woman. I don't trust her daughter. I'm going to make sure she's okay. And because she's so focused on that, she's not seeing all the warning signs. So it ended up actually being a really intrinsic part of the story, that was really rewarding to sort of work through with Tracy. So it was really great.
And especially as a horror nerd, as I am as well, do you find it a little bit harder to write horror knowing that there's so many, like, especially with people who consume horror a lot? It's kind of like, I've seen it. Like, how do you approach it? Like, how can I take something that could be viewed as someone did it already, and or build this particular scene up and twist it that way they're not expecting it in a way that they usually will expect it to come?
I mean, for me, I find that I have to just find a story that I care about and that moves me. And that if I try and reverse engineer it, it'll just it'll mess me up. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I'm fortunate that I have, as mentioned, I've been telling stories, and usually on the darker, weirder side, since I was a kid. And so I'm fortunate that I have a pretty out there imagination. And so I often, I'm very lucky that I do come up with stuff that people haven't necessarily seen a million times. To your point, obviously, horror is a vast, vast genre. And also, as the common saying goes, there's no such thing as a new story in 2025, or has there been for hundreds of years? But I think for me, my North Star is just, do I give a shit, basically? And that's all I can do. If I care about the story and I think it's cool and I think it's weird and I think it's thought provoking, uh, then I just have to trust my gut on that, you know? Because again, yeah, I know there are people that work this way, and certainly in an industry where there's so much demand and there's mandates, and oh, we need a new vampire movie, and oh, we need a new raunchy girl comedy. There are so many people that kind of set out to like fill a demand. And for better or worse, my brain just doesn't work that way. And so I just go and tell a story that I care about. And in this case, I got lucky. I was, the ending, which again, no spoilers, just seemed like the obvious way to end it to me. And then I had so many people being like, oh my God, the twist at the end is so great. The twist at the end is so great. And so again, I just kind of, I followed my instinct. I told the story that felt the most powerful to me. And, it seems like it worked out. So yeah, that's not, I guess, very helpful advice, but it's what works on my end. Yeah.
And for my final question is, what do you hope audiences take from this particular film? Because there are some underlining themes of like moving on, accepting. Like, what do you hope the
Exactly.
audience will take from the film?
Well, I would say that a theme that I have come back to a lot in my work is the absoluteness of grief, and the idea that there's really there's no way to sidestep it. Obviously it's one of the most excruciating things that a human can feel. And of course, we want to run away from that and avoid that and swipe that to the side. And, my kind of core thesis in a lot of my stories is you really literally just cannot do that. And if you try, it'll get you some in another way. And so, in Amalia's case, what she's really trying to do is deflect having to grieve her mother's death. And while she's found this wonderfully noble way to do that, and while it does seem potentially like a healthy coping mechanism, ultimately she's trying to get out of like doing the work of grieving. And so my idea, and I guess if I could impart any kind of, message via the story, is there's no way around grief. The only way around is through. And as much as that sucks and as horrible as it is, and for anybody who's lost, a parent, a family member, a best friend, anything, the last thing you want to do is feel those feelings, but it's the only way to get rid of them. And I really believe that very strongly. So, that's a kind of very earnest human message that's buried kind of deep in a very supernatural, weird story. But that, I think, is ultimately what I was trying to get across.
And how can audiences follow you? Is there a website or is there socials the way they can keep up with next projects?
Absolutely. We're on Instagram at a good death short film, where we have lots of updates. We're at the very beginning of our festival run. HollyShorts is our third festival and our US premiere. So we're continuing to get notifications kind of daily at this point. We finished the film in April, so you submit and it's around now that you start actually hearing from places. So hopefully, we've submitted to a ton all over the country, all over the world. So, if you're a horror nerd who's got a horror festival in their city, we might be coming your way and would love to see all of the horror nerds uniting out there. But give us a follow on Instagram. We'll keep all the updates rolling in, and especially because HollyShorts is this coming next weekend. There will be hopefully some fun red carpet pics and all of the glitz and glamour that comes along with a Hollywood premiere, which I'm incredibly excited about.
Thank you, Kaz. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for Imaginative Visions Journeys. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from Imaginative Visions, you can visit imaginativevisions.com.